Okay, welcome everyone to our second CSOC working group. Today, we're excited to have presentations first by Gordon and Uva, who are going to share kind of their deployment, Gen3 deployment process for the Australian Biocommons, and hopefully we can have a good discussion about how to get some or all of that into Gen3 and what that looks like. And then Jawad's going to present on an update on the CSOC work, the CSOC dashboard, I think that he and his team have been working on. So Gordon or Uva, whoever is leading this, feel free to kick it off.
Gordon will
Yeah,
be.
yeah, sure. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. All right. Welcome everybody. My name is Gordon with Australian Biocommons, and today I'll be we walk through how we deploy Gen3 using AWS CDK and GitHub to ensure scalable and secure and that automated deployments across multiple environments. Managing and deploying Gen3 is can be complex, and because it's not just about deploying Helm charts. We also need to provision networking, databases, security policies, monitoring, all which must be consistent across development, staging, and production environments. In this section, we're going to explore the deployment pipeline architecture and how we use AWS CDK and EKS blueprints. Also, we look at the benefits of GitOps and why we follow a multi-account strategy to enhance security and scalability. By the end of the session, you will have a clear understanding of how we achieve repeatable version control deployments and how you can leverage similar automation for your own infrastructure. Okay, so we're gonna beginning by having a look at our current state and what we've achieved so far. Our current state at the moment it's pretty good with 90% of the Gen3 stack automated via infrastructure pipelines. However, credential management and pre-deployment configurations still need improvement. Automating credentials is not always feasible, as you don't want some of the stuff to be in the code. However, we're able to automate a fair bit using AWS Security Manager. Before diving into a solution, let's define infrastructure as a code and why we use it. Infrastructure as a code, or simply IAC, it allows us to define version and deploy infrastructure just like application code. So instead of manual provisioning resources like computing and networking, we use declarative configuration that consistency, which is ensure consistency across environments. With the IIC, infrastructure changes automated, reducing deployment errors and making it easier to scale. If you've used Terraform in the management VM, then you've been using infrastructure as a code. Now we understand IIC. Let's look at why automation is critical for deployment processes. Okay. Deploying Gen3 consistently across microenvironment is complex due to dependencies. Things like you have script proxies, database setup, and other network component. And manual configuration increase the risk of inconsistencies. So by leveraging AWS CDK and GitOps, we achieve scalable, secure, and consistent deployments. And the infrastructure changes are fully traceable and auditable. And this enables scalable and consistent deployments across all environments, reducing manual and reducing effort, ensuring security. Now that we have a structured automated deployment strategy, the next challenge is managing deployments across multiple AWS accounts efficiently. As I mentioned earlier, to ensure security and scalability, we use multiple AWS accounts for different functions. The networking account plays a crucial role by facilitating connectivity between environments using a VPN and transit gateways. This allows us to securely access Gen3 environments that are not made public, which ensures controlled access. Monitoring is managed through a dedicated account where AWS manage Grafana and Amazon manage Prometheus, provide centralized observability, which enables real-time monitoring, logging, and alerting to enhance system reliability. Code pipeline operates within a separate account, which we call the tools account, which automate deployments while maintaining strict security boundaries between workloads. With this setup, Gen3 workloads will run in isolated accounts, ensuring better security, compliance, and performance. Next, we're going to have a look at the tooling account in a little more details. The tools account serves as the central hub for deploying infrastructure across multiple AWS accounts. It is responsible for managing CI/CD pipelines, AWS code pipeline, and code build, which automate deployment securely and efficiently. By using cross-account IAM roles, the tools account can assume permissions in targeted accounts such as networking, monitoring workload accounts, allowing you to deploy resources while maintaining strict security boundaries. Before diving into the pipeline flow, let's look at the tools and framework enabling the automation. We use GitOps, which ensures version controlled, trackable, and auditable deployments. And AWS CDK helps us manage infrastructure as a code, reducing human error and simplifying complex deployments. We also leverage the AWS CDK version of EKS blueprints, which provides a well-architected framework out of the box. So when we provision our clusters, it's already confirmed to AWS well-architected framework. With that, let's walk through how this translates into an actual deployment process. Currently, we have 6 pipelines, each with its own repository and a specific function. These pipelines must be initially deployed in a particular order. And this is important because you cannot deploy a database if you don't have a VPC or your network is not set up yet. Let's go through the process. The deployment sequence begins with setting up the network, database, and the credentials, followed by the EKS pipeline, which provision the Kubernetes cluster and bootstrap it with a Gen3 Helm charts. At this stage, not all of our pipelines have been open source, as the reason for this is network and security configurations may differ across implementations, and ours is highly customized for our purpose, and there's a fair bit of hard-coded configuration. However, we can provide them if there's enough interest.
Just
now,
a quick question. Which of the pipelines here are open source?
Okay, so at the moment we have the EKS a pipeline, and another one is a sample workload which has a configuration for Helm charts, which is also open source, which can be forked and customized. However, with this, I'll get to later with more details on how you can get started with just this one. Because, for example, network is, I would say, if you're familiar with AWS, it is very trivial to configure and provision. Same thing with the database. So they're not highly critical, but however, if you need assistance, we can make them happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. So let's look at how a typical deployment pipeline operates. Yeah. So, for example, we use we have a WAF, it's web application file in front of our Gen3. So in this hypothetical example, if a file change is needed, a developer or engineer modifies the configuration and commits it to Git. This action triggers an automated build and deployment process. The change is first deployed to the development environment, then progresses to staging upon success. Before reaching production, it pauses for manual approval to ensure control over critical updates. Okay. Now we can explore how you can get started with these deployment pipelines. Okay. To get started, it's important to first understand the Gen3 Helm charts and their role in the deployment. As mentioned earlier, we haven't released all the pipelines. So in order for you to get started, we need to provide a VPC with a private and public subnets, a database, which is Postgres, and also credentials in the AWS Secrets Manager. If you prefer, the EKS pipeline can also create a default a VPC with a private and public subnet, but we don't recommend this for production workloads. We highly recommend that you create a a VPC, which confirms to your security policies and plans. So while multiple ADAPS account is recommended, the tool account is not required if you are only testing this pipeline. So if you just want to get going quick, you can deploy everything in one testing account, and when you're ready, you can provision all your multiple AWS accounts. Once you get you have an understanding of Gen3 Helm charts, the next stage is to fork the pipeline repos. There are links at the end of the presentation. And for the workload repository, you can either fork it or you can just create your own with a similar structure tailored to your needs. And then the next stage will be to set up the necessary credential and AWS Secrets Manager, including Argo CD credentials. And once everything is configured, you can simply proceed with the deployment. All the instructions are on the README of the repository. Next, we're just gonna have a quick comparison with the cloud automation approach. As you can see on this table is that with our approach, we don't need management VM. So, and we use the AWS CDK and GitOps, which allows us to eliminate management VM, and also integrate CI/CD, which improve observability while ensuring error reduction. Okay. Next, we're just going to look at the summary of the key benefits of our approach. So with the AWS CDK, we use high-level constructs that make infrastructure easy to read and modify. For example, if we need to change the engine versions of or resizing Postgres across the environment, it will be a code change and not a manual process. And now it takes about a couple of hours to stand up a production grade Gen3 environment if we need to. So basically, with this approach, we get version control, reproducibility, and better security, but we're using manual interventions. And that brings us to the last slide, which is questions.
Can you post those links in the chat so I can capture them?
Yeah, sure.
I think Gordon's going to share the slides too. Is that right, Gordon?
Yeah. Yes, I'll share the slide too.
Okay, we can get them done.
Gordon, this is very nice work. I have to make sure I understand all of it, but it's just wonderful work. How long did you work on it, and did you have any help, or did you do it all yourself?
Just basically me and Uva, we've been working on this for I would say for the past year or so.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
This is really cool. I had a question about the squid pipeline. You said you guys are doing self-healing for squid. That's something that we want to look into. Because Squid has presented some issues in the past where we have to manually push out some fixes and stuff.
Yes, you're sure. So I think making that open source won't be that much of a challenge because there's not any customized, there's not much customized configuration in there. I think that should be able to be easily done. So I can share that with you very quickly.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
And the CDK, is that written all in CDK JavaScript?
We use a TypeScript because
Okay,
yeah, so it's improves our development life cycle because it's typed, so you can find errors like real quick. So that's what we prefer. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, and you guys had multiple pipelines. Do they have to run in that same order that you showed? I think you had 6 different pipelines.
Yeah, so initially when you create your environment, so you want them in a specific order. Let me see. Yeah, because for example, you cannot deploy the EKS cluster if you don't have your networking, your VPCs, and your subnets. So that's why you want them in that particular order. But that's just for initial deployment. But after that, you could run them in whatever order you want. Then they can work independently.
That makes sense. And
yeah,
does CDK support one overarching like an umbrella thing where you can encapsulate all the different pipelines into a single module? In theory?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, yes, you can do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And CDK will always just do cloud formation in the background.
Yeah, basically, yeah. At the end of the day, it's all cloud formation. That's how it keeps the state of the stacks. Yeah.
All right.
But
Cool.
without having to deal with the YAML or the JSON. Yeah.
And the CDK can run outside pipelines, right? You don't have to run them in code build pipelines.
Yeah, that's correct. You could even run it locally from your machine with the right credentials. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could even run it on GitHub Actions.
Right.
The nice thing about Code Pipeline is just that you can connect the environments together and then you can have the stage gate in there like Gordon showed before, so that when you make a change to your pipeline, it gets automatically rolled out by Code Pipeline. You can test and verify everything still works with your infrastructure change. And then once you do that, you just in Code Pipeline, you say, okay, now promote this change into production, and it will automatically roll it out there. That's the benefit, and that's the reason we're using it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you manage the Helm deployment through this as well, right? Or
Yeah, so so when we provision our initial provision our the cluster initially, so it get bootstrapped with a Helm chart via the workload repository, which has all the Gen3 configuration. And so when you need to manage your Helm charts, you just make the changes in your workload repository.
okay. And do you have different configuration repositories for dev and staging, or yeah?
So we have the same repository. We just separate them by directories. So all the Gen3 stacks just have one workload repository at this time. So if we need to add environments, let's say we want to add a sandbox environment, then we just create a configuration in the workload repository and just push that. to deploy the new environment.
That's awesome.
There's a question from Colin Gordon in the chat, if you can see that, about non-AWS or hybrid environments.
Yeah. This is one of the differences between the cloud automation and this approach, because this approach does not support multi-cloud. It's specifically just for AWS, and we're 100% AWS shop. That's why we decided to use AWS CDK. But at this stage, we've not thought about other environments, maybe in the future.
Are there any other questions about this before we kind of think about some steps for what it might look like to get this into the Gen3 code base or some of this? Are there any other questions about the actual
Yeah,
deployment?
I had a couple of questions on that. Like, so let's say we do integrate this into the or parts of this into the CSOC cluster. I'm trying to think like how we could make that work, since this basically could be executed inside a container as well, right? So CDK can run inside a container, and then provision the whole pipeline for you if you wanted to, correct?
Yeah, you can potentially do that. But then you probably gonna lose the visibility and the traceability if it's gonna run inside the container.
Right, because you're not using the code pipelines.
Yeah, so preferably you should use some kind of pipeline. It doesn't have to be a code pipeline, but you just
Right.
so you want to see what's happening, what's being deployed, who's deploying it, and all that auditable stuff. Yeah.
I've actually never used code pipeline, something that I can look into and see if we can maybe mimic some of those features into the portal that we're building so that it'll be available. And kind of to Colin's point as well, then maybe we can have the same kind of architecture where infrastructure as code in any language can run in a container, and then you can sort of get an overview like this in that portal. So if you were to spin up things in Google Cloud, which Colin, you guys are doing Google Cloud, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted over here. I can't find the button. We're in Google Cloud, on-prem, AWS, and Azure.
Oh, awesome. Do you guys have any infrastructure as code for those environments that you would be able to donate to Gen3 so that we could replicate that kind of architecture in those clouds?
Yeah, we have a combination and some things that we're working on. We follow a two-stage bootstrapping process. That gives us the flexibility. The first process is the provisioning of infrastructure. For that, we're using Terraform or OpenTofu and modules there to provision. But it's different. Those modules are different depending on which environment they go into, obviously. We're using an RKE2 provider for on-prem alongside some other things. The stage 2, we're currently transitioning and working on leveraging Cluster API for downstream infrastructure creation, and there's some additional bootstrapping patterns associated with that as well. That's not ready for donation, but we're working towards donation or the ability to donate the Terraform modules for the different environments. We did a rework of, we're currently doing a rework of the AWS Terraform. So we're not doing it the same way that we do it for, or that cloud automation does it, but we're doing it in a way that enables that secondary bootstrapping phase as well for AWS. We already do it that way on GCP though.
When you say secondary bootstrapping, is that bootstrapping of Gen3 itself?
So it's more, so it's Gen 3, but it's also additional components that are required, like Kibana, Prometheus, Elasticsearch, Longhorn, like any other additional components that are needed alongside the data commons to enable a broader set of tools beyond just Gen 3 itself. So everything that Gen 3 requires, but also some additional tools. But I think we think about those as infrastructure as code in the same way, even though they're software components.
Yeah, that's similar to kind of how we are doing it now as well. We have our Terraform that spins up the base thing, and then we have Argo CD being bootstrapped, and then Argo CD sets up all the cluster level components for us as well. That way we can also mass update across all of our environments just by merging to Git.
Yeah, exactly. We follow a minimum viable platform approach, similar to what you might see from there's a project that's affiliated with the CNCF called Backstack. So it's backstack.dev. So we're leveraging kind of that similar Backstage, Argo, Crossplane, Kyverno. We're not using Crossplane a whole lot yet because we didn't really need it. But but in general, yeah, we're trying to get Argo in there, and then we bootstrap additional cluster tools and the Gen 3 environments and get all that prepared. That just gives us more flexibility. As long as we get the base infrastructure in place, then we can leverage that secondary bootstrapping phase anywhere.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I imagine
it resonates.
It's very similar to this.
Sorry, what?
I imagine it's similar to the flow they have here. I really like what you guys have developed here.
Yeah, this is really cool.
Gordon, what are the next steps so that we can, I mean, what are the next steps you recommend so we can put some version of this, you know, with the ideas of Colin and Jawad and others into Gen 3? I mean, let's think of it as a roadmap so we get something, and then as Colin has more stuff ready, you know, we'll you know, we integrate what's ready at what time so we could sort of get different versions of this out. And Jawad, I know you have to think about how your stuff, you know, leverages this.
Yep.
What is a process we could use to sort of get a community consensus? Because this is great. We sort of want to bring a version of this into Gen 3. What are the next steps for that?
I think the best approach will be to firstly, we have it available to the community as much of it as possible, and so we can different community can have a look and see if there's some improvements, and also we are not duplicating the work. So for example, Jawad could be working on this particular pipeline, and I could be working on the same thing. I think it's really important that everybody is on the same page, so we don't be working on the same thing.
Right. Jawad, and any next step thoughts of how this broadly relates to what you're doing, and what are the next steps?
I have a few thoughts, yeah. So I think having some sort of an overarching module that I was alluding at to begin with, so that we can deploy a single module that does all the different pipelines in order, would be nice. And then we can run it in a container, and then essentially build it into whatever we're building for the CSOC portal and give people the ability to choose between either Terraform, if that's what they want to be using, what we've built, or the CDK that are being built by Australian Biocommons. I don't want to fork the code. Like, I would like the code to be still managed and maintained by the Australia Biocommons, and then maybe we can do testing against like versions, essentially. So that way you guys can still keep on building, but if we have a tag that we can use that we know is working um, with with the community, essentially, that would be really cool. That way we don't have to maintain any of the actual code that is going on in CDK. It's still maintained by the Australian Biocommons, which would be a cool way if that's possible.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
there a
and
simple diagram? So as other groups do their Google and Azure code, is there a common architecture we can all use
so
that works
that's
together?
kind of what I wanted to uh, show. If I can borrow the screen a little bit, maybe I'll do some diagramming and show like how that would fit into what we're trying to build, essentially. I'll also bring up my whiteboarding tool and we can try to talk through it, see if it makes sense, if it's a sensible way to approach this. Okay, so this is that CSOC dashboard that we've kind of
I
been
don't,
building.
oh, wait a minute. You're just showing the GitHub help charts? What do you're not drawing yet, right?
No, this is the CSOC dashboard that
Okay.
we have been building.
Oh, that's the CSOC dashboard. I'm sorry.
No
Okay.
worries. Yeah. We've basically compiled it in. It's deployable now, although it's not feature complete. Right now, we only have our dev cluster added here. The idea is that you should be able to create environments or clusters to deploy into. Right now, that hasn't been implemented. And that is where I'm thinking any infrastructure provisioning, such as Terraform or CDK, would essentially come in and be part of this portal. Right now you can only import existing clusters, and then let's say if we have a test cluster, it'll generate some certificates for you, a service account that can do stuff, and just a deployment with an agent that connects back to this portal. The other idea is that we have a create endpoint, and over there we are presented with a UI where you can, either the first step is essentially the credential. And the way other providers does it, and we use Datadog before, and the way they solve the credentials part is that you have to create an IAM role in your, and this is specifically for AWS, but we could potentially do something similar for other cloud providers as well. You create an IAM role in your account, which allows us, so the CSOC, to assume essentially this role, and now we have access to do stuff in this AWS account. The idea is to essentially get all the networking, all the databases, and everything from your from all the hard work that you guys have put into the CDK, for example, using this IAM role to basically bootstrap everything. And then that, in the end, should give you another cluster yet ready to deploy into. Yeah, it doesn't follow the same pipeline, but that's something that we can discuss, like building out if we can see that that makes sense. But at least you are able to bootstrap something minimal, and then you can start deploying Gen3 onto that cluster using a nice wizard. Yeah, so you get like an end-to-end deployment of Gen3, including the infrastructure that we can have not just in AWS, but eventually, in Azure and in Google Cloud, or if you want to do on-prem as well. Obviously, you can't, provision actual computers in people's homes. So that's where we can show people to basically just deploy this until they're, as long as they have the cluster ready. they can deploy the agent, and then this can take over. Over time, we can, build in more features into this. Something that we've been missing from when we went off Datadog is a good way to do inventory management of all of your S3 buckets and all of your EC2 hosts. That would be cool to be able to build into this sort of portal as well. Right now, it's basically built around Kubernetes resources. You can see like all of the stuff that is deployed into our dev environments. In the future, it would be nice to also build around other things. I've added some mock pages for integration with Elasticsearch, which is a core component of Gen3. You can go in here, you can do at least some sort of overview of what your cluster is looking like. And maybe we can also integrate some tools like Kibana or other tools so that we give the administrators of Gen3 a nice view into whatever is going on in the back end of it. And then obviously building in the integrations with Grafana and everything. And then sort of this becomes the one place to deploy your infrastructure from, but also to deploy and manage Gen3, essentially. The hard part that we have to figure out, especially with integrating the different code from the community, is to have some sort of framework or a way to be able to run these different types of infrastructure as code. So whether it be CDK, Terraform, or some other fancy new infrastructure as code tool. And that's why I was thinking about running them in containers, essentially. It'll be a fun project.
I'm sorry, why don't we, Joel, let's let a few people comment first.
Yeah.
And then Colin, and then we can go back and discuss it further. I just want to see, as you sketch that out, starting with Uwe, what your hand is raised, and then Colin, I'd like your approach, just how we can get this, get a process that works for all the different players.
Thank you. I think another thing that Gordon and I had been discussing is whether we get our pipelines up to scratch and get it into AWS Marketplace, because that way you can get around having to build an interface that, kicks off the pipelines. There's heaps of configurables and all that kind of stuff in there, where if you want to build a generic UI, you're just going to be down in the weeds for a bit. So that would be another possibility and another path of going.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, because I don't think Gen3 is on the AWS Marketplace, and that would also put like Gen3 on the map in the AWS Marketplace, and we could either just point people to the marketplace so that they get something up and running, or interface with just the marketplace if we need to.
Colin, thank you. Colin, how do we take what you're doing across the multiple clouds and sort of integrate it with what you've heard?
Yeah, 100%. So a couple things as well. I'm sorry, it's been a long day, so my brain is it's 50% here. I know OCC has a marketplace offering, and we do as well now, but I'm not sure about OCC's, but ours is just professional services. But it's primarily around setting up the foundational infrastructure required to be able to manage Commons, as well as some of the additional tools. And we do have some Gen3 language that just went up live like a couple of weeks ago. And so we're still trying to get some motions together for that. So I need to align with Bob and crew, but we're talking to the global healthcare folks and some other folks at AWS, trying to communicate the value of this solution to them. But in our minds, and based on what we've seen from some of these implementations and something philosophically I'd probably like to continue to echo, is that these institutions and organizations are, as through trying to adopt a commons, are realizing or are seeing the need to adopt just cloud native and Kubernetes in general, where the data commons ends up being one portion of the environment that they create there. And we are continuing to try to encourage the institutions to look at this as not just how to manage a commons, but to just manage your research compute in general, where the commons becomes one portion of that. I don't know if it makes sense to say that out loud, but I look at it like if we have an orchestration tool for managing a commons and creating a cluster, importing a cluster, I would want to make sure that that tool doesn't conflict with other things that I may have deployed into that environment. We want it to be able to manage the commons and some of the life cycle and some of the closely coupled tools, including pipelines and other things that might be required inside of that environment as well. But I want to be really careful not to try to say, well, you need a dedicated Kubernetes cluster for this one instance of a commons. And I don't think Jawad's stuff is going down. Jawad, I don't think your stuff is going down that road. Would love to kind of dig in a little more deeply on that, but I just saying it out loud, there is a much broader story here than just the ability to provide access to data via interconnected commons. There's also the ability to enable using that data and accessing that data and running inference and workloads and actualizing, making that data actionable and not just making it available, which I think we can work toward telling that broader story, but it does require that those other foundational infrastructure pieces are in place. So while our approach may emphasize that foundational piece, it's also not saying that deploying an environment specific to only Gen3 and hosting the commons is a bad approach. It's not at all. It's just we're taking a fundamentally different approach because we want to enable, clusters at the hundreds of machines size and people using Bedrock and other tools to do things with that data and not just host it. So
Yeah,
sorry, that's pretty long-winded, but just trying to share our philosophy a little bit.
And, it fits well with, Jawad's approach is assume there's a Kubernetes cluster and to put his CSOC over it. I mean, from a community viewpoint, and it may take getting us all together, at least the local people around a whiteboard and doing it at a time. Australia could join us, but I think having a community architecture where we have a diagram the community can see where with different steps, you have the option of running what we just saw from Australia, how that fits in with the CSOC Jawad is doing, how that fits in with what you're doing. And, if we could get that community architecture agreed to, that everyone could fit in, and then, people could each have their, have their marketplace that fits into that, as well as their other marketplaces offering more general services, but it would be clear from the community, what choices they have, what CSOCs they can have, et cetera. So I think that may be a to-do, just to get a diagram, a meta architecture so you could do it. They're going to be, if Australia, if you, Gordon, if you guys do a marketplace, would your code still be open source so that, or would it just be available in marketplace? And if it's in marketplace, how is it licensed? As I understand marketplace, there's a lot of flexibility in how you do it.
Yeah, it will still be open source.
Oh, that's great.
We're paid by the taxpayer. Our work belongs to the people.
That'd be great. And then, so let me ask a question to Jawad, Colin, and Australia and whoever else is on, if you guys were to go away for 5 minutes in the dark and sketch out an architecture of how all these pieces fit together, would we get one common picture? We get two sort of common pictures, or we get 5 different ways to do it? I see, at some level, Colin, as you talk, the general infrastructure, which can be used to set up a large Kubernetes cluster, Jawad stuff fits in. Some of the stuff we heard from Australia, they want to give a very simple pipeline, which a lot of people want, just to bring up the whole shebang in the way we saw in those slides. Would we get a common picture, and would we be able to sort of each make very small changes to support it, or we get 5 pictures and need a lot of conversation? I just don't have a feeling for it yet.
I think we could definitely get one picture. A lot of already very close. Even going back to the KubeCon talk that Jawad and I worked on, there's very much a lot of alignment philosophically that we're already very close. We're already there. We may think about it differently because I'm coming from like a commercial and just general cloud native space and not necessarily the research side, but everything here is all well aligned, and especially the GitOps principles and those other elements there.
And Gordon, can you tell if, that common picture would have, not everyone would be doing all components, and there'd be choices, and the people setting these things up would be able to go to different places. But do you think you're part of that common picture, or is there a little plumbing that needs to be done to fit in, or can't you tell yet?
It's hard to tell at this moment, but I think to get started quickly, I think I mean that's what we've been focusing on, how to get a Gen3 instance up and running real quick without spending too much time, and also maintainability. So I think from our approach, I think there could be 2 or different pictures from what I see, but I think it's a little bit too early for.
Yeah, we'd like to do it. And I just have a trivial question. Should have been obvious, but can I use exactly what you showed to bring up 3 commons, sort of all over the same Kubernetes cluster, or do I have to modify it a bit, or do I have to add a little more functionality? It was clear how one comes up, and obviously I could sort of run it twice on different clusters or different partitions, but is it essentially the same thing if I want to bring 3 commons up? I just call those 6 pipelines 3 times?
Yeah. So the way we designed this, it will create one cluster per common. However, you can create multiple commons in a single cluster
With your code.
Yeah, with your code. So or you just have to configure that in the workload repository. There's an example for that. Yeah, so it's possible to do that. So you just have to make a few changes in the Argo CD configuration, and yeah, it can be done. But our preferred approach is to have one common per Kubernetes cluster.
So we're at time. I mean, Colin, Gordon, Jawad, this is, we're so close now. Colin, Jawad, if you could get a picture I'd like to take a look and, get Australia to sort of weigh in, how they fit in. I think this is exactly what the community forum is supposed to do. And, the community forum is sponsored between OCC, which is a 501c3, and the University of Chicago, which is a 501c3. So it's precisely designed so for-profit academia and government groups can all get together and share these kind of designs, and still have their own marketplaces and their own professional services. So I think this is exactly what we wanted to see. We're at time. I just thought this was a great meeting. I'm looking forward to the next steps. Michael, we're at time, but when's the next CSOC?
Well, it was scheduled for February 26th, but that's also the community forum. So we either need to change it or just skip that one. We could find another time in and around that potentially.
Yeah, I want to keep this momentum up. It's going to save people so much time. And there's so much going on. I think if we get this done,
Okay.
let's take it offline. I gotta
I'll
go.
set up another doodle poll for the community so we can have another meeting to maybe advance this overall
Was it
architecture.
the public community forum with everyone, or was it the steering committee?
The community forum with everyone is February 26th.
Okay, so we probably should keep that and maybe do an abbreviated version of this, or let's see how close we are.
Okay, I can try to set up another time that we can keep doing the sort of architecture discussion, which sounds
Okay.
like maybe the overall next step.
Okay, thank you, guys.
And
Okay,
Bob, from me.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, quick one. I don't know if anybody else is up for it, but I think it would be really beneficial maybe to have some sort of summit or in-person thing and just meet up in Chicago. But I know some of y'all are remote as well, but I'm willing to get together, and I think it would be helpful at some point. It might be difficult for Australia, and I apologize, but just vocalizing it.
Or we could go to Australia.
Yeah,
I like it.
But just come here. Or the other thing is we can obviously discuss with Gordon if he's free to travel. That would be another solution. I'm unfortunately landlocked for probably the next 6 or 7 months. I have a newborn.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
We'll figure something out here. That's a good idea, Colin. I don't know if we have to talk again about having a kind of Gen3 summit, what that might look like. So that is a possibility, but I'll send out some options for another meeting sort of at the end of February so we can keep this going, and maybe we'll do some async in the lead up to that.
Yeah, I might ping you guys async on Slack as well, just to learn a little bit more, Gordon, Uwe, and Colin, and share some of the ideas on like how
Yes, please.
I'm thinking on proceeding and how we could possibly, integrate more you guys' work into what we're building and opening up for just in general infrastructure as codes integrations there. As Colin mentioned, like if we have groups that are interested in trying out Bedrock, how do you set up Bedrock for them? And there's probably blueprints that we can leverage for this as well.
AWS funding also.
Yeah,
They'll eat that up.
That'd be cool.
I do want to.
I'm meeting up with AWS tomorrow, and I can kind of bring it up with them as well to see if they're interested in helping out. I think that would be for their benefit as well, probably.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me know who your new Chicago reps are for AWS. July, that would be awesome. I do want to say thank you really quick to the Australia folks. One thing that we've struggled with communicating in the past is the need that is usually pressing for that management VM, which really is not necessary in a lot of modern scenarios. And so you guys calling that out as a difference maker there, I think is really key and really great. And would love to have some kind of discussion around that, because if we can help provide some broader industry guidance as far as security for environments like these in cloud native, then I think that's a good platform to spread the word about the Gen3 on as well. So I think that was great. That might seem like a small thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, before we break, Jawad and others, we do have a Slack channel dedicated to this. If that's a good forum for any of these discussions, it might be a good place to centralize those discussions.
Is that in the Gen3 Friends?
It's in the Gen3 Friends, yes.
Okay.
And if anybody isn't in there and wants to be, you should all be, but let me know. Okay. All right. We took too long. But thanks everyone. This was really great. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.